A basic law of creativity is that the more competitive your sector, the more creative you need to be. The more creativity you need to be able to access and leverage in your organization. Just like you need to leverage other tools, like capital or people or intellectual property or real estate and location. I mean, creativity is a tool. And if you're, let's say, in a non-competitive sector, let's say you're a monopoly, you don't really need creativity, right? It's a nice thing to have. This is the mansion of a monopoly here in Barcelona, and I think this is actually this building is, it's a product of a creative act. I mean, this is like, super masculine, almost like a tank shell, and yet it kind of floats in the air and it's shimmery. But they don't need this building to sell you water, right? I mean, if this were Torre Akbar, or this were Torre Akbar, or this were Torre Akbar, actually that, you'd still buy their water because you don't have a lot of choice, right? If you look at the value chain of water sourcing and delivery and marketing and every part of it, there are parts of that ecosystem where it's much more competitive, right? I mean, and so you will find creativity just kind of built in to business models. And understanding the cost of creativity has got to be built in to a business model. And the creative processes are understood and built into companies, much, much more. Now, ironically, the water company here is incredibly creative at times, but in this case, they're trying to not sell you their product. This is, I think, a piece of amazing creativity. This is from a drought in '08 when there was a shortage of water, and they had a hard problem. Right? They were competing. They weren't competing against other companies, but they were competing against an ingrained human habit of people using too much water, right? And so they had to shake people up, and so they turned to creativity. Microsoft is a very creative company. I mean, the start of that company was really the definition of creativity. There was they made something that really, or they saw an industry that didn't exist, and they created for that. But in a lot of times in its history, it didn't really make sense to put a lot of energy into creative outbound marketing because the company was in such a strong position competitively that it made sense to put creative energies more internally. Like if you stand just this way, you could scoop up more cash more efficiently. Not to say that their creativity did not come out. I mean, a very competitive area for all companies, including Microsoft, was recruiting talent, right? The best engineers, the best business people. And so you'd see their energy come out. This is Bill Gates and Steve Ballmer being sort of goofy in a car. But this was not, you wouldn't see this on television. You wouldn't even see this on the internet. Or you'd see this in company events or at specific trade conferences. Now people would say they're in a very different position. They've got competitors have kind of rolled tanks onto the lawn, and they are having to really focus again on outbound creativity. And so they're doing some really interesting things, like this is a social media community effort they have called Channel 9. They've actually hired now what some people say is the most creative, very large advertising agency in the States, a firm called Crispin Porter in Miami that, for example, did this thing for Burger King called the subservient chicken. I don't know if any of you are familiar with the subservient chicken, but it's one of the most popular viral efforts on the internet ever. Something like 500 million hits, 20 million or more unique visits. And it took, the idea of a chicken sandwich at Burger King was that you could get it any way you want. You could order a chicken any way you want. And so someone had the idea to have a subservient chicken, and you could go and type in anything. There were actually 300 commands you could type. Like, do the moon, I'm not going to attempt to do the moonwalk, but do like, YMCA, or do a golf swing, or if you told it to go eat at McDonald's, it would walk up to the front and put its finger down its throat. So and this cost nothing, right? This was creativity that enabled Burger King to get tremendous attention drive sales of chicken sandwiches without having to buy media. Now, of course, they do a lot where they buy media. But so these guys are now working for Microsoft as they are in a more competitive environment.